The grand chamber of the Valeri Dominion was not merely a room. It was a testament to 100,000 cycles of absolute, unbroken order, a cavernous expanse of obsidian and bioluminescent crystal suspended in the gravity-neutral core of the capital station, High Orbit Prime. Here, the air was kept intentionally thin, forcing a slow, deliberate rhythm of breath from those who gathered, ensuring that no passion, no sudden outburst of anger or fear could disturb the sanctity of the decision-making process. The lighting was dim, emanating from the swirling nebula visible through the megaton glass of the vaulted ceiling, casting long, shifting shadows that danced across the faces of the High Council. There were 12 of them, representing the 12 great species that had ascended to the stars, unified under the concordat of eternal peace. They sat upon raised daises of weeping stone, their robes of office, shimmering fabrics woven from the silicate threads of the gas giants, draping heavily around their diverse forms. Silence was the primary language of the chamber, a heavy, oppressive silence that weighed upon the soul, broken only by the rhythmic thrumming of the station's atmospheric cyclers and the occasional shifting of a chitinous limb or the rustle of feathers. In the center of this amphitheater of judgment stood High Arbiter Kalen of the Ethelgard. He was a creature of imposing stature, his 4 arms folded behind his back, his skin the color of polished slate, marked with the gold-inlaid scars of the ritualistic diplomatic wars. He did not look at the counselors. He looked at the holographic projection hovering in the center of the room, a swirling, static-filled representation of a star system located in the darkest, most neglected spiral arm of the galaxy. Sector 88Z, the Dead Zone, or so it had been called until the faint, erratic energy signatures had been detected. Kalen felt a tremor of irritation, a rare emotion for one of his station, ripple through his primary neural cortex. The situation was an embarrassment. It was a bureaucratic anomaly that had festered into a diplomatic crisis, and now it threatened the very perception of the Dominion's omnipotence. The message had been sent. The standard pan-galactic summons that every sentient species received upon the detection of warp-capable technology. It was a simple directive: acknowledge the Dominion, power down weapon systems, and prepare for the arrival of an uplift team. It was the law. It was the natural order. And yet, from the third planet of that yellow dwarf star, there had been nothing. "Silence," Counselor Xylth whispered, the sound like dry leaves skittering over stone. Xylth was a Vorn, an insectoid species known for their terrifying patience and lack of empathy. 3 standard cycles have passed since the transmission was beamed directly to their major population centers. We used the mathematical universals. We used the hydrogen frequency. We even projected the image of the Great Peace. And yet, silence. Do they mock us, Arbiter? Kalen turned slowly, his heavy boots making no sound on the floor. They do not mock, Counselor. To mock requires an understanding of hierarchy. These creatures, these humans, they simply ignored it. Or perhaps they are too primitive to comprehend the magnitude of what was offered to them. The scans indicate they are fractured, divided into nation-states, still squabbling over resources on their own mudball. It is possible the message was received and dismissed as atmospheric interference. "Impossible," boomed Counselor Grax, a massive, rock-skinned behemoth whose voice vibrated in the chest cavities of everyone present. The transmission energy was sufficient to light up their primitive ionosphere. They saw it. They heard it. They chose to ignore it. This is defiance, and defiance, if left unchecked, becomes a rot. If one species ignores the summons, others will follow. The cohesion of the Dominion rests on the certainty of our power. The debate had circled this drain for hours. Kalen knew the politics at play. The Dominion was old, and with age came a creeping paranoia. They feared the unknown not because it was dangerous, but because it was unpredictable. A species that did not answer the door when the gods knocked was a species that did not fear the gods, and that was unacceptable. Kalen raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to rise from the lower tiers of the audience chamber. "It matters not why they remained silent," Kalen stated, his voice smooth, projected by the microamplifiers in his collar. "The protocol is clear. When a message is ignored, a messenger must be sent who cannot be ignored. We do not send a probe. We do not send a diplomat in a shuttle. We send the Ethelgardian Wrath. We send a foreign ship of such scale and power that their sky will darken, their tides will shift, and their primitive leaders will fall to their knees in terror. We will force acknowledgement. We will bring them into the fold, or we will extinguish their potential before it becomes a threat." The council shifted. The mention of the Wrath, a dreadnought of the Eclipse class, was significant. It was a world breaker, a ship designed during the ancient wars to crack planetary crusts. It was a relic of a time before the peace, maintained by the Ethelgard as a symbol of ultimate authority. To deploy it was to declare that diplomacy had failed before it had even begun. It was a sledgehammer used to crack a nut. "Is that not excessive?" asked the ethereal projection of Counselor Lyra, the psionic representative, her voice echoing in their minds rather than their ears. "They are young. They are ignorant. To send a warship of that magnitude, the psychic shockwave of such fear could damage their collective consciousness permanently. We seek subjects, Arbiter, not broken slaves." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "They damaged their own standing by ignoring the summons. We do not go to destroy, Lyra. We go to demonstrate. They did not get the message because they chose not to listen. The wrath is a message that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to the survival instinct. I shall command the vessel myself. I will look these humans in the eye. I will demand their submission, and if they possess any logic, they will give it." The journey to the edge of the galaxy was not instantaneous, even with the Dominion's slip-space drives. It gave Kalen time to study the file on humanity. It was a chaotic mess of contradictory data. They were a species of extreme duality. They created art of profound beauty and weapons of grotesque cruelty. They loved with intensity and hated with equal fervor. They had split the atom to power their cities and to incinerate them. They were biological contradictions, walking paradoxes that should have extinguished themselves millennia ago. And yet they persisted. They expanded. Their radio bubbles were noisy, filled with music, screaming, debate, and silence. But the official channels, the frequencies reserved for galactic diplomacy, dead air. Kalen stood on the bridge of the Wrath, a platform of command suspended in the center of a spherical observation deck. The ship was 10 kilometers long, a spearhead of black metal and glowing engines that dwarfed the escort cruisers flanking it. The crew, thousands of Ethelgard warriors and technicians, moved with the precision of a clock mechanism. They were the finest in the galaxy, disciplined, fearless, and arrogant. They had never known defeat, for the Dominion had not fought a true war in 1,000 years. They were enforcers of peace, and they wore their superiority like armor. "Approaching the Helios boundary," the navigator announced, his voice clipped. "Dropping from slip space in 10-9, transition imminent." The universe twisted. The stars stretched into infinite lines of light, then snapped back into pinpoints. The Wrath shuddered as it re-entered normal space, the inertial dampeners groaning against the sudden deceleration. Kalen gripped the railing, his eyes fixed on the forward view screen. He expected to see the yellow sun of the Sol system. He expected to see the blue marble of Earth. He expected to see a clutter of primitive satellites and maybe a few orbital habitats. What he saw made the breath catch in his throat. The Sol system was there, yes, but it was not as the scans from 3 cycles ago had depicted. The space between the planets was not empty. It was laced with a shimmering, translucent web of energy, a lattice that pulsed with a faint, rhythmic blue light. It connected the gas giants to the inner rocky worlds, a vast, intricate infrastructure that seemed to ignore the laws of orbital mechanics. And orbit was crowded. Not with the primitive tin Kalen had expected, but with massive, geometric structures. Octahedrons of silver metal the size of moons hung in silent vigilance over the poles of the gas giant Jupiter. "Sensor report," Kalen barked, the sudden surge of adrenaline flushing his system. "What is that structure? Why was this not in the initial survey?" "Unknown, Arbiter," the tactical officer replied, his fingers flying across the holographic console. "Readings are confusing. The energy lattice appears to be a stabilization field. They are harvesting the solar wind, Arbiter, but not with panels. They are manipulating the magnetic field of the star itself. This is Type II civilization technology, but the biological scans still read them as the same primates. This does not make sense. They were broadcasting radio waves 3 cycles ago." "3 cycles," Kalen muttered. "A blink of an eye, how could they advance so far?" "Perhaps they were hiding it," suggested the first officer, a veteran warrior named Vruk. "Perhaps the radio waves were camouflage, a facade of primitivism." "Then they are more dangerous than we feared," Kalen said, his voice hardening. "Open a CH. Anal, wideband, all frequencies, override their local communications. I want every screen on that planet to show my face. I want every human to know that the Dominion has arrived." The communications officer complied. The Wrath powered up its transmission arrays, systems designed to pierce planetary crusts and broadcast into bunkers. "Channel open, Arbiter. You are live." Kalen straightened his spine. He projected the aura of the High Arbiter, the face of judgment. Inhabitants of Sol III, he began, his voice booming through the translation matrix. I am High Arbiter Kalen of the Valari Dominion. You were summoned. You failed to answer. You were warned. You failed to heed. Now I stand above your world with the might of the Ethelgard. I bring you the choice you denied yourselves, submission and integration or devastation. Disable your defenses, lower your shields. Identify your leaders and prepare to receive my shuttle. You have 1 standard hour to comply. He cut the feed. He waited. He expected panic. He expected the energy lattice to flicker as they scrambled to divert power to weapons. He expected fleets of small, desperate ships to launch in a futile attempt to intercept them. He got nothing. The energy lattice continued its slow, rhythmic pulse. The moon-sized octahedrons did not move. The Earth turned slowly, indifferent to the threat of the 10-kilometer dreadnought casting a shadow upon its moon. Are they deaf? Vruk growled. Did the transmission go through? Confirmed, the comms officer said, sounding shaken. It was received. I can see the data packets being absorbed by their network. They filed it. Filed it? Kalen asked, incredulous. Yes, Arbiter, the return signal was a passive automated response. It reads, message received. Ticket 99,482 be generated. Please hold for an operator. Current wait time indefinite. The bridge fell silent. The sheer audacity was paralyzing. A ticket! They had reduced the arrival of a galactic empire to a bureaucratic inconvenience. They mock us, Vruk roared. Burn them, target the nearest orbital structure, vaporize it, show them the price of insolence. Hold, Kalen ordered, though his own blood was boiling. There is something wrong here. Look at the energy readings on that lattice. If we fire and that lattice is a shield. It is not a shield, Arbiter, the science officer interrupted, her voice trembling. I have analyzed the waveform. It is a containment field, but not for them. Explain, Kalen snapped. It is facing outward, Arbiter. It is not designed to keep things out of the Sol system. It is designed to keep something in. Before Kalen could process this, a proximity alarm screamed. It was not the wail of a sensor detecting a missile. It was the deep, resonant klaxon of a gravitational displacement. A ship was appearing, not from slip space, not from warp. It simply was there where it had not been a nanosecond before. It appeared directly off the bow of the Wrath. It was small, perhaps only a few hundred meters in length, smooth and white, shaped like a teardrop. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no windows. It hovered in the void with an absolute stillness that defied the relative motion of the celestial bodies around it. Hail them, Kalen ordered, his curiosity warring with his instinct to fire. The screen flickered and a face appeared. It was a human, a female with pale skin and dark hair tied back severely. She wore a simple gray tunic with no insignia. She looked tired, not fearful, not awed, just exhausted. She held a cup of steaming liquid in one hand and rubbed her eyes with the other. This is Director Vance of Sol Traffic Control, she said, her voice sounding bored, translated perfectly into the clicking dialect of the Ethelgard. You're blocking the shipping lane, and you're screaming on the emergency frequency. Do you have any idea how much paperwork you just created for me? Kalen stared, the crew stared. The disconnect between reality and expectation was total. I am High Arbiter Kalen, he repeated, his voice rising in indignation. I command the Ethelgardian Wrath. We are the enforcers of the Galactic Concordat. You ignored our summons. We are here to bring you to heel. The human Vance sighed. She took a sip of her drink. Look, Kalen, can I call you Kalen? We didn't ignore your summons. We filtered it. Do you know how much spam we get from the Galactic Core? Join the Empire, buy this nebula, extend your warranty. We have automated filters for pre-type III civilization chatter. Your message got flagged as generic imperial posturing and went to the spam folder. Sorry, we've been a little busy. Busy? Kalen stepped forward, his fists clenching. You are a primitive species. You occupy one system. We control 1,000 stars. We have arrived to judge you, and you speak of spam. I have a weapon aimed at your world that can crack its crust. Vance looked up from her console, and for the first time her eyes focused sharply on the camera. The boredom vanished, replaced by a cold, terrifying lucidity. Okay, listen closely because I'm only going to say this once. That weapon you have, it's a particle accelerator based on fusion tech. Cute. But if you fire it inside the heliopause, you're going to destabilize the containment field we've spent the last 50 years building. The field, Kalen said, seizing the information. The one you used to hide. Hide, Vance let out a short, dry laugh. We aren't hiding, Arbiter. We're quarantining. We didn't answer your message because we were trying to save your life and the lives of every other species in this galaxy. Lies, Vruk shouted from the tactical station. They are stalling. Prepare the main cannon. Don't do it, Vance said, her voice dropping an octave. I'm not threatening you, I'm warning you. You notice the lattice is facing outward? It's because the threat isn't us, it's what's behind us. We sit on the edge of the galactic void. We found something there, something old, something hungry. Kalen hesitated. The demeanor of the human was not consistent with a bluff. It was the demeanor of a soldier who had been in the trenches for too long. What did you find? We call it the entropy wake, Vance said, tapping a command on her console. Sending you the data now, if your computers can handle the bandwidth. The main screen of the Wrath flooded with data. It wasn't a standard sensor map. It was a multi-dimensional topographical display of the fabric of spacetime. Kalen's science officer gasped, her limbs trembling. Arbiter, this is impossible. What is it? The sector behind Earth, the deep void, it is gone. It is not empty space. It is dissolved. The laws of physics are breaking down, and the breakdown is spreading. It's a tear in reality, Vance explained, her face grim. We opened it by accident when we first started testing warp drives 50 years ago. We woke something up. A non-baryonic infestation. It eats matter and converts it into nothing. It's been trying to push through into the Milky Way for decades. We didn't ignore you because we were arrogant. We ignored you because we've been fighting a war for survival against a literal nightmare dimension. And we didn't want to drag the rest of the galaxy into it until we had it contained. The silence on the bridge of the Wrath was different now. It was not the silence of arrogance, but of sudden, profound insignificance. The massive dreadnought, the pride of the Ethelgard, suddenly felt like a toy boat floating next to a dam holding back a tsunami. The lattice, Kalen whispered. It is a suture. You are stitching the wound closed. Trying to, Vance corrected. But your arrival just spiked the local gravimetric readings. The Wrath is massive. Your mass shadow is pulling on the tier. You're acting like a wedge. As if on cue, the ship shuddered violently. The red alert klaxons began to wail, a harsh, rhythmic screaming that tore through the comm. Arbiter spatial rupture detected, the tactical officer screamed. Behind the human fleet, it's its opening. On the view screen, the stars behind the Sol system began to bleed. Darkness, a blacker black than the void, began to ooze into reality. It swirled like ink in water, and where it touched the human energy lattice, the blue light flared and sparked. The tier is widening, Vance shouted, her calm veneer cracking. You've destabilized the anchor point. Get your ship out of there. You're too heavy. We cannot jump, the navigator cried. The gravitational interference is jamming the slip drive. We are trapped. Kalen watched with horror as the darkness expanded. Tendrils of shadow lashed out, grasping at the nearby asteroids which simply vanished upon contact, not exploded, not crushed, but deleted from existence. The Wrath began to slide sideways, pulled by a gravity that defied logic. Full reverse thrusters, Kalen commanded. Maximum power. It's not enough, Vruk yelled. We are being dragged in. Hold on, Vance's voice cut through the panic. We're not losing a diplomatic incident to a black hole today. Invictus, are you on station? Wait, Kalen said. Who is Invictus? From the shadow of Jupiter, from behind the massive moon-sized octahedrons, a shadow detached itself. If the Wrath was a mountain, the ship that emerged was a continent. It was a slab of gunmetal gray, utilitarian and blocky, lacking the aesthetic curves of the Ethelgard ships. It was immense, easily 50 kilometers in length, bristling with thruster banks the size of cities. It didn't look like a warship, it looked like a tool, a mobile industrial platform of godlike proportions. On its hull, painted in white letters a kilometer high, was the word INVICTUS. This is Invictus Control, a deep, synthesized voice boomed over the channel. Vector confirmed, locking gravitational harpoons. Brace yourselves, Lee and friends, this is going to be a bumpy ride. Beams of solid green light erupted from the Invictus, slamming into the hull of the Wrath. They were not lasers. They were tractor beams of impossible intensity. The Wrath groaned, its structural integrity fields whining as the massive human ship anchored itself against the gravity of Jupiter and pulled. They are towing us, Vruk whispered, his eyes wide. They are towing a dreadnought. Diverting auxiliary power to the lattice, Vance ordered. We have to seal the breach before the entity manifests fully. Invictus, get them clear, then realign the stabilization nodes. Acknowledged, hauling the tourists out of the danger zone. The Wrath was dragged backward, away from the encroaching darkness. Kalen watched the screen, mesmerized. The human ships, the small ones he had dismissed, were darting around the tier, firing canisters of glowing white matter into the void. What are they doing? Kalen asked. Injecting exotic matter, the science officer replied, breathless. They are calculating the decay rate of the vacuum and patching it. Arbiter, this is engineering on a cosmic scale. We build ships. They build reality. The darkness screamed, a psychic sound that bypassed the ears and drove a spike of ice into the brain of every crew member on the Wrath. It was a sound of hunger, of rage. A claw of shadow lashed out, seeking to grasp the retreating Wrath, but the energy lattice flared, turning a blinding white. The humans were pouring the energy of their star into the net. Sealing in 3, 2, 1, Vance's voice was tight. The light collapsed, the darkness snapped back, severed. The stars returned to their fixed points, the tier was gone. The Wrath drifted in the silence of the outer system, its engines humming idly. The Invictus released its hold, drifting alongside them like a silent guardian. Kalen slumped into his command chair. He felt old. The arrogance of the Council, the pride of the Ethelguard, the certainty of their place at the top of the food chain, it had all evaporated in the span of 10 minutes. Arbiter, the comms officer said softly, Director Vance is hailing us again. Put her through, Kalen said, smoothing his robes. He felt like a child who had wandered into a forge and almost burned the house down. Vance appeared again. She looked even more tired. All right, crisis averted. That was a close one. Usually we keep the tier stable, but your mass shadow really threw off the calibration. Kalen stood. He bowed his head, a gesture he had never performed for a non-Ethelguard. Director Vance, you have saved my ship and my crew. We were arrogant. We did not know. Vance waved a hand dismissively. Forget it. We know how it looks from the outside. Primitive radio waves silence one solar system. It's the perfect camouflage. If the galaxy knew we were sitting on a door to hell, everyone would panic. We figured it was better to be thought of as the quiet primitives than the guardians of the apocalypse. You fought this alone, Kalen said, a sense of awe creeping into his voice. For 50 years. Someone had to, Vance said. We found the tier. We broke the vase. We had to glue it back together. Look, Kalen, we didn't join the Concordat because we couldn't spare the resources for galactic politics. We need every ounce of energy, every brilliant mind, every scrap of alloy to keep that thing contained. But maybe we can't do it alone anymore. Today proved that. She leaned forward. You came here to deliver a message, right? Submit or be destroyed. That was the message, Kalen admitted, shame coloring his tone. Well, here's our counteroffer, Vance said, a small, tired smile touching her lips. We don't want to rule you, we don't want to fight you, but we need help. We need resources, we need raw materials, we need heavy ships to help anchor the lattice. If the Dominion wants to be useful, stop posturing and start hauling. Help us hold the door shut. Kalen looked at his crew. He saw the shift in their eyes. The fear was gone, replaced by a new kind of respect. The respect a warrior feels for a comrade holding the line against overwhelming odds. The Council will be difficult to convince, Kalen said thoughtfully. They fear what they do not understand. Then show them, Vance said. Take the data, show them what almost ate their galaxy today. Tell them the foreign ship they sent wasn't ignored, it was saved. And tell them the humans are ready to talk, but not as subjects, as partners. Kalen looked at the massive Invictus outside, then back at the small, weary woman who commanded forces he could barely comprehend. I will deliver your message, Director, Kalen vowed, and I will ensure it is heard. He turned to his navigation officer. Set a course for high orbit prime, maximum warp. Arbiter, Vruk asked, what do we tell the Council? Kalen looked at the view screen, where the blue Earth shone bright and beautiful against the dark. We tell them, Kalen said, that we went looking for subjects and we found Titans. We tell them that while we played at Empire, they were saving the universe. And we tell them that if they wished to survive the night, they had best make friends with the Watchmen. The Wrath turned, its engines flaring blue, and jumped into the slipstream, leaving the Sol system behind. But the silence was gone. The message had been received not by the humans, but by the galaxy. The humans were not silent because they were lost. They were silent because they were working, and the work was far from done. The slip-space journey back to high-orbit Prime felt different this time. The silence of the Wrath was contemplative. Kalen spent the hours in his quarters, reviewing the data Vance had transferred. It was terrifying. The mathematical models of the entropy wake showed a hunger that was exponential. If the humans failed, the tier wouldn't just consume Saul, it would unzip the spiral arm within a millennium. The Dominion had spent centuries debating trade tariffs and border disputes, while a species they considered primitive held a knife to the throat of oblivion. He thought of the Invictus. The sheer lack of aesthetic on the ship haunted him. Dominion ships were art. They were designed to intimidate and inspire. The human ship was a brick. It was designed to work. It spoke of a pragmatism that chilled him. A species that abandoned beauty for function so completely was a species that had stared into the abyss and realized that the abyss didn't care about art. When the Wrath docked at the Obsidian Spire, the reception was grand. The Council expected a triumphant return. They expected Kalen to march a cowering human leader into the chamber in chains. They had prepared a ceremony of integration. Kalen walked into the grand chamber alone. His armor was scuffed from the journey, his face grim. The murmurs began immediately. "Where are they?" Counselor Xylth hissed, his mandibles clicking. "Where are the savages?" "There are no savages," Kalen announced, his voice amplified to fill the hall. He walked to the center of the dais and threw his data slate onto the table of weeping stone. It clattered loudly in the shocked silence. "You have failed," Counselor Grax rumbled, rising to his full, terrifying height. "You return without tribute, without submission." "I return with my life," Kalen snapped, turning to face the behemoth. "And yours, and yours, and yours." He pointed to each counselor in turn. While we sat here debating their insolence, they were holding back the dark. He activated the holoprojector. The recording of the event played. The chamber watched in stunned silence as the Wrath, the symbol of their ultimate power, was tossed like a leaf in a storm by the gravitational anomaly. They watched the darkness bleed through the stars. They heard the scream of the void. And then they saw the Invictus. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the human dreadnought decloaked. The scale of it was undeniable. The raw, industrial power of the tractor beams was evident. "They possess Type II technology," the science counselor whispered, her ethereal form flickering with agitation. "That energy manipulation. They are using their sun as a capacitor. This is elder race technology." "How?" "Necessity," Kalen said. "They did not advance through conquest. They advanced through survival. They are not warriors, counselors. They are engineers, and they have engineered a lock for a door we didn't even know existed." "And the message?" Xylth asked, his voice trembling slightly. "The summons." "They filtered it," Kalen said, allowing a grim smile to touch his lips. "They thought we were selling something." A ripple of nervous laughter, hysterical and short, moved through the room. "They offer an alliance," Kalen continued, regaining control of the room. "Not submission, alliance. They need resources. They need our fleets to help haul raw materials to the lattice. They are tired, counselors. They have held the line alone for 50 years. They ask for help." "And if we refuse?" Grax asked, though the bluster was gone from his voice. "Then they will eventually fail," Kalen said simply. "And that tier will open, and the Dominion will be the first course in the feast of entropy." The debate that followed was not like the one before. It was not fueled by arrogance, but by fear and a sudden, desperate need for action. The reality of the Invictus and the entropy wake had shattered the illusion of their supremacy. The Ethelgard were the police of the galaxy, but they had just discovered the firefighters. In the end, the vote was unanimous. The Wrath would return to Saul not as a conqueror, but as the first vessel of the relief fleet. Months later, Kalen stood once again on the bridge of the Wrath. They were in orbit around Jupiter, alongside a dozen other Dominion ships. The Invictus loomed nearby, its hull-scarred but unbroken. The space around them was a hive of activity. Alien ships, sleek and beautiful, flew alongside blocky human tugs, hauling massive asteroids into position. The energy lattice pulsed with a renewed strength, fortified by the combined technology of 12 species. On the screen, Director Vance looked less tired. Her hair was down and she was smiling. "Nice work on that synchronization, Kalen," she said. "The lattice efficiency is up 15%. "It is an honor, Director," Kalen replied. He looked out at the work being done. A Vorn heavy lifter was welding a strut to a human stabilizer node. A psionic amplification array was being integrated into the human sensor grid. "You know," Vance said, taking a sip of her coffee, "we never did get that ascension protocol you guys talked about." "The protocol?" Kalen mused, looking at the unified fleet. "It states that a species is uplifted when it joins the galactic community, learns the ways of peace, and contributes to the greater good." He watched a human shuttle perform a reckless, impossible maneuver to catch a drifting piece of debris before it hit a Dominion cruiser, the pilot whooping over the comms. "I believe," Kalen said, a warmth settling in his chest, "that we were the ones who needed uplifting, Director. We sent a ship to teach you, but we were the ones who learned." Vance toasted him with her mug. "Welcome to the night shift, Arbiter. Try not to fall asleep." "Humans didn't get the message," Kalen whispered to himself as the channel closed. "They were the message." And out in the dark, the lattice held firm, a shield of light against the chaos, held by hands both scaled and soft, four-armed and two, united not by law but by the will to endure. The silence was over. The age of the builders had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.